Dr. Zuhdi Jasser is a physician in Phoenix, Arizona. He is a father, a husband, and the leading voice in the world as a Muslim about the terrible problem confronting Islam and the terrorism issue. This is a very courageous man, a man who has spoken forcefully since September 11th about the terrible problem, international problem of Islamic terrorism. It's a great honor to welcome to Without Notes, Dr. Jasser.
Thank you, Michael. It's great to be here.
Thank you.
An honor.
Doctor, let's start, if we can, at the beginning, because there's so many fascinating contemporary topics to talk to. I want to set up for the audience a little bit about who you are and how you became who you are. So where were you born?
I was born in Ohio. My parents then moved to Louisiana for a few years. My father was trained at Tulane, and my mom got her master's there.
Now, maybe we should also tell the audience, where were your parents born?
Yeah, so my parents are from Syria.
Your parents are from Syria?
Yeah, they're political refugees from
Not
Syria.
Not a good piece of real estate currently.
No. When the revolution, as much as it kinetically went into overdrive in 2011, has been, as far as most of our families, going on for 50 plus years. And in 1963,
so
the
what
Ba'athist,
is going on today is just merely an eruption of something that's been brewing for 50 years.
I mean, Syria is basically the North Korea of the Middle East. It is a brutal, tyrannical regime that has ruled Syria in a fascist, nationalist military dictatorship since 1963. And in that year, my grandfather's business was nationalized. His newspaper was taken over. He was under house arrest for a few years. My father finished medical school and then escaped to Lebanon and waited to come here on political asylum. And in '67 they came here, and I was born a few years later.
Born in Ohio,
yeah.
Moved to Louisiana.
And my dad did his training in Tulane, and then they moved up to Wisconsin when I was 5. So really my memory of growing up is Wisconsin.
Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And your dad was a
cardiologist.
A cardiologist.
Yeah. And my mom's a pharmacist.
Okay.
My grandfather.
Now, when he came here, your mom and your dad, did they speak English?
My father spoke very good English. He was a writer and fluent in Arabic and English because he went to school in London.
Right.
My mom did not speak any English and learned here, took classes, and was able to then get a master's education at Tulane. My grandfather, Zuhdi Jasser, who was under house arrest and a politician in Syria, had worked for democracy in the 40s and 50s. On my father's side, had been very active, and my mom's father was a Sharia court judge, more of a religious figure in Damascus in the Supreme Court there, family court. So both of my grandparents come from a tradition of Islamic teachings and also democratic attempts at democratic governance.
Yes,
which
but
failed.
Unquestionably, family devoted to the Islamic faith.
Absolutely, and the interesting thing is because my father was educated in London, he was a Anglophile. He just loved Western democracy, and his father loved it too. And they tried to bring some of those ideas into Syria, but because the military was just full of thugs and corrupt entities. I mean, one of the reasons we'll talk in a minute, I'm sure, about why I joined the Navy was my dad told me and my grandparents that the reason America succeeds is the civilian government runs the military, and the military takes orders from our civilian government. In the Middle East, the military runs society and is a deep state that controls the society.
It's a very important delineation. Now, you're in Wisconsin, and you're growing up an Islamic family in Wisconsin. Where do you go to high school?
I went to junior high and high school in Neenah, Wisconsin, right south of Appleton and Green Bay, about 20 miles.
That sounds so all-American.
Yeah, there were 4 other Muslim families. I was the only Muslim in my high school. My parents and 3 other families built the first mosque in northeastern Wisconsin.
What is it that you want to do when you...
so my dad was a physician, but being active in mock trial and debate, I thought I wanted to do law.
Thought you wanted to be an attorney.
Yeah, I did. And then I spent some time with attorneys and realized that it was sort of 5% just enjoyment and 95% sort of just research and tedium, and from not that any offense to attorneys, but I wanted to have a profession that I could spend most of my time interacting with people, and so I went to medical school wanting to be a primary care doc and be a family doc from the beginning. So I was in part of what's called the Target MD program.
In part influenced by your father having been
Yeah,
a
absolutely.
doctor, sure.
I think what made me follow in his footsteps as far as a physician is the fact that he never really told me to do that. I think had he told me to go into medicine, I probably would not have done it.
You've been a rock and roll singer.
Yeah, exactly. So he just sort of sat back. I actually also, in addition, wanted to be an attorney. At first, I was going to join the Navy because I've always been enamored with the American military. I definitely got that from my parents and my grandparents. But being a line officer is an amazing commitment, and I thought, well, let me go into medical school and see if I could do that route with the military.
So you go to medical school. Where do you go to medical school?
I went to undergrad, University of Wisconsin, and then medical school, Medical College of Wisconsin, a private school that used to be Marquette University in Milwaukee. And I was on a 7-year program, so I got accepted to medical school out of high school in a short program.
Now, if I can ask you a personal question, because I hear these stories of these unbelievable student loans that people... Did you pay for your own college education, or did your parents pay, or a little of both, or how did you do
Undergrad
that?
Was state school, so it wasn't as expensive. I had gotten accepted to Brown, but decided, listen, I don't want to spend that much. And so my parents paid for my undergraduate, but the medical school was on a Navy scholarship. So the taxpayers paid for all of my medical education. In exchange, I owed 4 years. I ended up serving 11 years.
So after medical school, you join the Navy.
Actually, you join, when you take your commission, you take it before you start medical school.
Oh, okay.
And then the summers you do what's called active or active duty training, so that you do officer training initially, and then rotations at Bethesda Naval, San Diego.
And as you enter the Navy, do you feel any overt or subtle discrimination or problem by virtue of your being a committed Muslim?
I have to tell you the fact, not at all. And even the fact that you'd ask me that, the family I came from, I never even went to the military thinking that was going to be an issue. I went there because it was my country that I wanted to serve. Wearing the uniform, I mean, the pictures my parents would take, wanting to see me in uniform was something that, I mean, they abandoned their Syrian nationalism the moment they stepped on American soil. And
so this is a question, I have a very odd question in hindsight. If I had met your parents 5 years into their living in America, they're from Syria, they now live in Wisconsin, and I say to them, sir, if somehow, tomorrow, Syria and America were playing soccer, who, sir, would you root for? What would they say?
It would be a no-brainer that it would be America. And actually, that is a great question.
It is a great question.
It is a great question because
the ramifications to it are...
No, because not only that, if you go to the hookah bars and other places, I see a lot of my friends still cheering for the Syrian team.
Oh, no, I know it.
And what is the difference? It has to do with folks that come from families that are here for political asylum. The folks that come from families that are here for economic reasons, where they come to get an education and decide that the free market here gives them a ton more money than they could get in Syria, that's not an ideological move. That's simply for economics.
That's an economic move. So now, you join the American military. There is zero, from your perspective, zero sense of discrimination, being a minority faith. You're welcomed into the American military, treated like everyone else. What's your experience? Many people today don't know anyone who served in the American military. That's somewhat unfortunate. They don't even know anyone. What is it like? What do people who don't know anyone, have not served in the military, and don't know anyone who served in the military, what do they need to know?
It's interesting. As a doctor, I always compare the VA medical system to the military medical system that I trained in. you'd think it's similar because they're employed government doctors.
I would think.
Two completely different institutions. And no offense to the VA, but we know it's going under tons of reform now and needs reform. It's more like socialized medicine. Versus the military is, I have to tell you, one of the most professional, leadership oriented, because people are there not because they're trying to get a paycheck, but most every one of my friends and colleagues who I still keep in contact with now are there because they wanted to serve their country. And many of us docs came from very expensive medical schools, so I was a resident in internal medicine at Bethesda with folks from Harvard, George Washington, expensive schools because they were scholarship students.
So I think what you're saying to me is that many of the people that you served with came from outstanding schools.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Could have basically written their ticket anywhere they wanted, and yet chose to serve in the American military.
Exactly. And you know, the fact is that the spirit of what it means to be an American, I learned I was on a ship where supply officer was a Mormon, the deck lead officer was Jewish, our XO was Protestant, and my CO who I took care of was Catholic. We would have weekly discussions on faith, politics, and smoke a cigar.
Any atheists?
Yeah, I'm sure there was, but they weren't part of our religious conversations. And you know, the interesting thing is, I came from a family where my parents told me I just sort of organically did not have a chip on my shoulder.
Yes.
So when I went to the ship, they, you know, on my second week there, the administrative officer takes a picture of my ID without me seeing it, puts it around the ship, and says, "Arab terrorist on board. If found, report to the CO." And they were all worried that I found that hilarious. Hilarious. It was a joke. This is what officers do. And yet, so many people you tell that story to, and they're like, "Oh, you should have, you know,
sued them.
We should have sued them." I thought it was funny.
Right.
It's funny.
Right.
You know, if you don't have a chip on your shoulder and you're there because you're part of a team.
Well, but there's one other thing. You refer, and I think very wonderfully, as the chip on your shoulder. It sounds to me, as I'm listening to you, that your parents did not plant inside you and water the seed of victim mindset.
Yep, that's exactly it. Is that we are here as a gift. It is a privilege to be an American. We had more rights growing up in Wisconsin and joining the military that I grew up thinking I was an American that just happened to be Muslim, and that the government just gets out of my way so I can be myself. Versus most Muslims that are here saying, "Oh, we demand to be Americans, and you're going to give us our right, by gosh." And that just doesn't endear somebody who feels, because the issue of family is not only your nuclear family, but do they feel like they're part of the national family, that this is their country? Instead, they're blaming America for everything and not taking ownership.
By the way, as you're talking to me, I cannot help but think what a horribly poor job our country has done in explaining to its young citizens what is unique and distinctive about America. So for that part, that's worrisome. We do not teach young people today the unique, important, central, valuable uniqueness of the civilization. It's almost as if political correctness has removed that conversation from. America's a country. There's a lot of countries. We're just one.
The globalization thing is just, I can't tell you how toxic it is. And in the work we're doing now since 9/11, you know, you see these Muslims grow up and being pulled into something that they would die for. And the natural process for me to do the work I'm doing to reform the Islamic teachings that are doing that comes from a sense that the only thing I would ever die for is America. Because America is not a land mass. It's an idea.
It's an idea.
It's an idea of immigrants that share an idea.
It's an idea that we used to better teach.